Politicians often blame video games for some of the violence in our world. While it is true that the top 5 most popular video games right now are all shooter games.
In the 2 decades since Columbine, video games have been at the center of the controversy surrounding gun violence in America.
Particularly violent video games.
And it has experts and some parents alarmed.
This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace.
Do the guns on screen really translate into aggression in real life? Can video games make you violent? Are video games capable of stimulating teenagers to use weapons into educational institutions? One of the main arguments people make against video games is that they prime kids to be violent. Priming is a non-conscious form of memory where one stimulus influences the response to a subsequent stimulus. For example, if I said the word yellow, then ask you to name a fruit, you would most likely say banana. I want to talk about this topic so we can get a definitive answer once and for all. And that's the thing in this topic. We have two sides that are so entrenched in the respective answer that no one is bothering to actually stop and do the research. On one side, you have people who are so convinced that it must be the media we are consuming that's causing this aggression, that they are eager to point the blame. Because they are biased against games, they don't understand them. But on the other side, you have people like me, people who grew up playing video games, where our reaction is like, no, I play video games. I know a lot of people who play video games and we're not violent. The problem with that is it is not real proof. It is important to recognize that everyone's brains function differently. We are biased too in this debate because we are eager to defend this thing. That we love neither side here is having a conversation because we are both so certain that we are right. What I hope and all of us want, and that is truth, if video games have no connection to real world violence. If video games are to blame, then great. At least now we know that, and now we can start correcting for it at the end of the day. Instead of just share some cold hard facts, I've done a lot of research in this topic and most find no link between video games and violence, except this one. In this research suggests that youth who carry weapons are more likely to be aggressive and engage in behaviors such as fighting, substance use, and being suspended from school. Some studies have also found that youth who are being bullied or otherwise victimized may bring weapons to school for protection. Beyond behavior and experiences, particularly the role that violent media may play in weapon carrying, they address this very question in a study just released in the journal Aggressive Behavior. Using information from almost 1,500 youth 9 to 18 years of age who play video games and go to public or private school, they found out youth who were frequently and intensely victimized by peers were more likely to carry a weapon to school in the past 30 days compared to our youth. When we looked at youth based upon their victimization, experiences, and amount of violent content in the games they played, the highest percent of weapon carrying is reported by youth who are both victimized and play at least some games with violence. In contrast, none of the non-victimized youth who also play non-violent games carried weapons to school in the past month. Then they conducted a series of analyses that could explain the relationship between playing games with violent content and carrying weapons to school. This included being victimized by peers, being an aggressive person generally, using substances, and even exposure to violent content in other media, like television. In conclusion, they cannot tell whether the video games are causing youth to carry weapons to school, or if there is another factor that explains why youth who carry weapons to school are also more likely to play violent video and computer games. Certainly not all youth who carry weapons to school play violent video games, and not all youth who play violent video games bring weapons to school, which means video games are not causing them to carry weapons. And there is another factor that made them too, such as for protection and fighting. In conclusion, there isn't any connection between video games and violent activities. Correlation doesn't mean causation. Just because aggressive play lines up with a certain genre of game, there are any number of variables to account for that. Maybe it's not the game causing the aggression, but rather the gamer's personality being more prone to aggressive playstyles. It is not the game making people aggressive or teaching them bad behavior. Players with personalities that are more comfortable taking risks and getting aggressive are just more drawn to these sorts of high action, high intensity games. The reality is that video games are much more likely to provide a safe and healthy outlet for people. It is a way for someone to express and get out their stress or anxiety or anger out in fantastical way. Video games are not the problem.